The Galactic Council Station hung in space like a giant metal flower, its petals reaching out toward the stars. Inside, thousands of species from across the galaxy lived and worked together, each following strict rules about how to behave. Everything was clean, organized, and controlled. Nothing unexpected ever happened here, or at least that was how it used to be before humans arrived. Jiwan walked through the sterile white corridors carrying her data tablet. She was a xenobiologist, which meant she studied alien life forms. Her job was to watch different species and write down how they acted. It was usually boring work, but someone had to do it. The council wanted to understand every creature that came through their station, especially the dangerous ones. Her younger brother Hyun worked on the human embassy ship docked nearby. He called her every day to complain about how boring space diplomacy was. Jiwan always laughed and told him that at least he did not have to watch aliens eat their meals for 8 hours straight. They both missed Earth, but this assignment was important. Humanity had only joined the galactic community 3 months ago, and they needed to prove they belonged here. Today, Jiwan was supposed to observe a creature from a planet called Kranash. The file on her tablet made her nervous. The creature was classified as an apex predator from a death world. Death worlds were planets where everything tried to kill everything else. Earth was considered a death world too, which surprised most humans when they found out. The creature's name was Davreth. According to the report, it was the size of a small transport vehicle, covered in black scales that looked like volcanic glass, and had 6 glowing eyes. Its species had never been successfully studied up close because they attacked anyone who came near them. The council had managed to bring Davreth to the station as part of a cultural exchange program, but so far 3 xenobiologists had refused the assignment. Jiwan was the 4th person they asked. She said yes because she needed the work, and because something about the creature's photo reminded her of the stray dogs she used to feed back in Seoul. They looked scary too, until you realized they were just scared themselves. She arrived at the observation deck overlooking Davreth's containment area. The room was huge, built to hold creatures that could tear through metal. Force fields glowed blue along the walls, humming with energy. In the center of the room, Davreth lay on a raised platform, its massive body coiled like a sleeping dragon. Jiwan pressed her hand against the glass and watched. The creature's scales reflected the light in strange patterns. Its 6 eyes were closed, but she could see its chest rising and falling with each breath. It looked peaceful, almost beautiful. An alarm suddenly shrieked through the station. Red lights flashed along the corridor. Jiwan's tablet buzzed with an emergency message. System failure in Containment Bay 7. All personnel evacuate immediately. Bay 7. That was where she was standing. Jiwan looked down and saw sparks flying from the control panels below. The force fields flickered, and Davreth's eyes snapped open. All 6 of them glowed like molten gold. The creature stood up. And Jiwan realized the reports had not captured how truly massive it was. Davreth was easily 4 meters tall at the shoulder. The force fields were failing, but they were not shutting off completely. Instead, they pulsed on and off, creating a deadly pattern. Davreth roared and tried to move away from the platform, but each time it stepped forward, the fields activated and shocked it. The creature was trapped, being electrocuted over and over. Jiwan ran toward the stairs leading down to the containment floor. Her rational mind screamed at her to run the other way, but her instincts took over. She had seen animals in pain before. She knew that look in their eyes. The control room was empty. Everyone else had evacuated. Jiwan jumped over the desk and stared at the panel. She did not understand the alien technology, but she knew emergency protocols were universal. There had to be a manual override somewhere. Below her, Davreth roared again. The sound was filled with pain and fear. Jiwon's hands moved across the controls, pressing buttons until she found one marked with a symbol that looked like a lightning bolt crossed out. She slammed her fist on it. The force fields died completely. Silence fell over the bay. Jiwon slowly stood up and looked down. Davreth was staring directly at her, all 6 eyes locked onto her face. The creature's body was covered in burn marks from the malfunctioning fields. Smoke rose from its scales. This was it. This was where Jiwon died. She had just released an apex predator that was injured and angry. Every xenobiology textbook said injured predators were the most dangerous, but Davreth did not attack. It just stared at her, its massive head tilted slightly to one side, confused. Jiwon took a deep breath and grabbed the medical kit from the wall. She walked down the stairs into the containment bay. Her legs shook with each step, but she kept moving. When she reached the bottom, she was less than 5 meters away from Davreth. The creature watched her approach, its body tensed, ready to spring. But it did not move. Jiwon knelt down and opened the medical kit. She had no idea if human medicine would work on alien biology, but burns were burns. She pulled out a tube of synthetic skin gel and held it up so Davreth could see it. "This will help," she said quietly, even though she knew the creature could not understand her. "I promise I am not going to hurt you." She moved closer. Davreth's eyes followed her every movement. But the creature stayed still. Jiwon reached out with a shaking hand and touched one of the burn marks on its front leg. The scales were hot under her fingers. Davreth made a sound deep in its chest. Not a growl, exactly. Something else. Jiwon began spreading the gel over the burns. She worked slowly, methodically, the same way she used to treat the stray dogs. She talked to Davreth the whole time, her voice soft and calm. She told it about Earth, about her brother, about how scared she was right now, but how she knew what it felt like to be hurt and trapped. 20 minutes passed. Jiwon treated every burn she could reach. Davreth never moved. It just watched her with those 6 golden eyes, and slowly, very slowly, the tension left its body. When she finished, Jiwon stood up and stepped back. Davreth looked at its treated wounds, then back at her. The creature lowered its massive head until it was level with Jiwon's chest and made that sound again, a deep, rumbling vibration. Jiwon reached out and touched its head. The scales were surprisingly smooth. That was how the security team found them when they finally entered the bay. A human woman standing calmly next to the galaxy's most dangerous predator, her hand resting on its head like it was a pet. Nobody knew what to say. 3 days after the incident, Jiwon could not go anywhere without hearing footsteps behind her. Heavy footsteps that echoed through the metal corridors of the station. She did not need to turn around to know what was following her. Davreth had not left her alone since she treated its wounds. The council members were terrified. They watched through security cameras as the massive predator trailed behind Jiwon like a shadow. Whenever she stopped, it stopped. When she turned a corner, it followed. The creature maintained exactly 3 meters of distance at all times, never closer, never farther. "This is stalking behavior," Counselor Vexim insisted during the emergency session. The crystalline being's body flashed angry red colors as it spoke. "The predator is tracking prey. It is only a matter of time before it attacks." Ambassador Minho, the human representative, stood up from his seat. He was an older man with gray hair and tired eyes. "With respect, Counselor, the creature has had multiple opportunities to attack. It has not shown any aggression." "Not yet," Vexim replied sharply. "We cannot wait for a tragedy to occur. The creature must be sedated and returned to containment immediately." Jiwon sat in the observation gallery and listened to them argue about her life, about Davreth's life. She wanted to speak up, to explain that Davreth was not acting like a predator at all. but junior xenobiologists were not allowed to address the council directly. She could only watch and hope Ambassador Minho could convince them. The debate continued for hours. Finally, the council voted to give Jiwon 1 more week. If Davreth showed any aggressive behavior during that time, it would be sent back to Kraynash. The vote was close. Too close. Jiwon left the council chamber exhausted. She had been awake for almost 30 hours, answering questions, filling out reports, and defending her actions. All she wanted was to collapse in her quarters and sleep for a day. When she reached her door, she found Davreth waiting there. The creature sat on its haunches, taking up most of the corridor. Its 6 eyes watched her approach. As Jiwon got closer, she heard a sound coming from deep in Davreth's chest. A low, rhythmic vibration that the translator unit on her collar could not interpret. Davreth was shivering. The station's environmental systems were optimized for the majority of species, which meant the temperature was comfortable for most, but cold for creatures from hot worlds. Kraynash was a volcanic planet where the average temperature was 40 degrees Celsius. The station maintained a steady 22 degrees. For Davreth, this was like living in a freezer. Jiwon looked at the creature and made a decision that she knew was probably insane. She opened her door and stepped inside, then turned back to Davreth. "Come on," she said, gesturing toward her quarters. Davreth did not move at first. It stared at the open doorway, then at Jiwon, confusion clear in its alien eyes. Jiwon walked to her storage closet and pulled out her thermal blanket. It was a gift from Hyun, designed to keep humans warm in cold environments. She spread it out on her sleeping platform and patted it twice. "You are cold," she said to Davreth. "This will help." The creature slowly stood up and approached the doorway. It was so large that it had to lower its body almost to the floor to fit through. Once inside, Davreth looked around Jiwon's small quarters with obvious curiosity. The space was barely big enough for one human, let alone a human and a creature the size of a small vehicle. Davreth moved to the sleeping platform and sniffed the thermal blanket. Then, moving with surprising gentleness, the creature climbed onto the platform and curled its massive body into a circle. The blanket covered maybe a third of it, but Davreth pulled it close with one clawed foot and released a long, deep breath. Within minutes, the creature was asleep. The rhythmic vibration continued, softer now, almost like purring. Jiwon stood in her tiny quarters and realized what she had just done. She had invited an apex predator into her personal space. If the council found out, they would probably expel humanity from the galactic community. If Davreth woke up aggressive, she would die before she could even scream for help. But looking at the sleeping creature, Jiwon could not bring herself to regret her decision. Davreth looked peaceful, comfortable, safe. She moved to her desk on the opposite side of the room and tried to work on her reports. Every few minutes, she glanced over at Davreth. The creature never moved, its breathing steady and deep. The thermal blanket rose and fell with each breath. Hours passed. Jiwon's eyes grew heavy. She told herself she would just rest them for a moment, her head resting on her folded arms at the desk. Just a moment. She woke to alarms blaring throughout the station. Morning cycle had begun, and the automated systems were announcing the start of a new day. Jiwon jerked upright, her neck stiff from sleeping at her desk. She spun around, suddenly remembering what was in her quarters. Davreth was still asleep on her bed, exactly where it had been when she dozed off. The creature had not moved all night. It had not tried to escape, had not destroyed anything, had not hurt her. It had simply slept. Jiwon stood up and stretched. She needed to report to the medical bay for her daily health screening. All personnel who had contact with unknown species had to be scanned for pathogens. She walked toward the door, trying to be quiet. Davreth's eyes opened. All 6 of them fixed on Jiwon immediately. "I have to go to work," Jiwon said softly. She knew the creature could not understand her words, but tone was universal. "You can stay here if you want. It is warmer than the corridors." She opened the door and stepped out. Davreth stood up immediately and followed her. "No, stay," Jiwan said, holding up her hand. She had trained enough dogs to know the gesture. Davreth tilted its head but did not stop. It squeezed through the doorway and took its usual position 3 meters behind her. Jiwan sighed. "Okay, I guess you are coming with me." They walked through the station together. Other species scattered when they saw Davreth approaching. Some fled into side corridors. Others pressed themselves against walls, their eyes wide with fear. Jiwan felt bad for scaring everyone, but she could not exactly leave Davreth locked in her quarters. That seemed cruel. When they reached the medical bay, the doors slid open to reveal a crowd of people. Council security officers, xenobiologists, medical staff, and Ambassador Minho all stood waiting. They stared at Jiwan and Davreth with expressions ranging from shock to anger to fascination. "Xenobiologist Jiwan," the security chief said, his translator making his words sound flat and emotionless. "We received reports that the Cranash specimen entered your quarters last night and did not emerge. We feared a hostage situation." "A hostage situation?" Jiwan repeated. She looked back at Davreth, who was sitting calmly behind her. "No, nothing like that happened." "Then why did the creature enter your private quarters?" Counselor Vexim demanded, pushing through the crowd. "Explain this behavior immediately." Jiwan took a deep breath. She knew how this would sound, but she had to tell the truth. Davreth was cold. The station temperature is too low for its biology. I gave it my thermal blanket and let it sleep in my quarters where it would be more comfortable. Silence fell over the medical bay. Every single person stared at her like she had just announced she was going to jump out of an airlock. "You let it sleep in your bed?" one of the xenobiologists whispered. "On my bed," Jiwan corrected. "I slept at my desk." Ambassador Minho closed his eyes and rubbed his temples. "Jiwan, do you have any idea how dangerous that was?" "Probably very dangerous," Jiwan admitted. "But Davreth was cold and scared. I could not just leave it in the corridor." Behind her, Davreth made that deep, vibrating sound again. This time, the translator units picked it up. Every device in the room spoke at once, translating the sound into various languages. The translation was simple. Contentment. Davreth was purring. The discovery that Davreth was purring changed everything. Within hours, xenobiologists from across the station descended on the medical bay, all demanding to study the phenomenon. Apex predators from death worlds did not purr. They did not show contentment. They certainly did not form attachments to other species, yet Davreth refused to leave Jiwan's side. The council convened another emergency session, but this time they brought in specialists. Jiwan sat in the observation gallery again, but now she had company. Davreth lay on the floor beside her chair, its massive head resting on its front legs. Security officers stood at every exit, weapons ready, but the creature ignored them completely. Suji was the first specialist to arrive. She was a human psychologist who had been studying interspecies communication for the past decade. She wore simple clothes and had kind eyes that reminded Jiwan of her grandmother. Suji sat down next to Jiwan and smiled. "Hello," she said. "I am here to make sure you are okay. Not to judge you or tell you that you did something wrong, just to understand what happened. Is that all right?" Jiwan nodded. She liked Suji immediately. They talked for over an hour. Suji asked about Jiwan's childhood, her experience with animals, and her training as a xenobiologist. She asked what Jiwan was thinking when she deactivated the force field, and what she felt when she first touched Davreth. "I treated it like a scared dog," Jiwan explained. Back on Earth, I used to volunteer at an animal shelter. We would get dogs that had been abused or abandoned. They would act aggressive because they were afraid. But if you were patient and gentle, they would eventually trust you. And you thought Davreth was afraid? Suji asked. I knew it was afraid, Jiwan said firmly. I saw it in its eyes. That was not aggression. That was fear. Suji wrote something in her notes and nodded thoughtfully. You saw a pattern. Humans are very good at recognizing patterns, especially emotional patterns. We evolved to read body language and facial expressions because our survival depended on understanding what others were feeling. While Suji interviewed Jiwon, another specialist arrived. Daeho was the station's security chief, a serious man who rarely smiled. He had been watching Davreth through the cameras constantly, documenting every movement and behavior. He approached Ambassador Minho with a data pad. Sir, I need to report something strange, Daeho said quietly, though Jiwon could hear him from where she sat. The creature's behavior does not match any known predator patterns. It is not stalking Jiwon. It is guarding her. Guarding, Minho repeated. Yes, sir. Watch this footage from yesterday. Daeho pulled up a video on his pad. It showed Jiwon walking through a crowded corridor. Another station worker, not paying attention, walked quickly toward her from the side. Davreth immediately moved between them, blocking the worker's path. The creature did not attack or threaten. It simply created a barrier. Once the worker changed direction, Davreth returned to its position behind Jiwon. Minho watched the video twice. It is protecting her. That is my assessment, Daeho confirmed. Whatever happened between them, the creature now views Jiwon as something worth protecting. More specialists arrived throughout the day. The one Jiwon found most interesting was Bora, a human exobiologist who specialized in animal domestication. Bora was young, maybe only a few years older than Jiwon, with short hair and excited energy. She practically ran into the observation gallery when she arrived. This is incredible, Bora said, staring at Davreth with wide eyes. Do you know what you have done? You have triggered a bonding response in a species that was thought incapable of bonding? I did not do anything special, Jiwon protested. I just treated its wounds and gave it a warm place to sleep. Exactly? Bora pulled out her own data pad and started showing Jiwon graphs and charts. Look at this. These are the behavioral markers of bonding in domesticated species. Pack loyalty, protective instincts, contentment responses, proximity-seeking behavior. Davreth is displaying all of them. But Krinash are solitary hunters, one of the Council's xenobiologists objected. They do not form packs. They do not have family structures beyond brief mating periods. This behavior should be impossible. Bora shook her head. We thought it was impossible. But evolution is not rigid. Species adapt. Maybe Krinash had the capacity for bonding all along, but their environment never required it. Or maybe Jiwon's actions triggered something dormant in their genetics. The council debated for hours. Some members insisted this was a security risk. If one human could bond with a Kranash, what would stop someone with bad intentions from doing the same? Others saw it as a scientific breakthrough that could change how the galaxy understood predator species. Counselor Vexham remained opposed. This is too dangerous. We cannot allow a precedent where apex predators roam freely through the station. What if the bond breaks? What if the creature reverts to aggressive behavior? Then we deal with it, Bora said firmly. But right now, Davreth is healthier and more stable than it has been since arriving at the station. Look at the medical data. Its stress hormones have decreased by 40%. It is eating regularly for the first time in weeks. By every measurable standard, this bond has improved its well-being. A new voice spoke up from the council chamber. What about the human's well-being? Everyone turned to look at the speaker. It was Counselor Telmon, an insectoid being whose species valued logic above all else. We have focused entirely on the creature's behavior. But what about xenobiologist Jiwon? Is she safe? Is she happy with this situation? All eyes turned to Jiwon. She suddenly felt very small under all that attention. Davreth sensed her discomfort and raised its head, making a low, questioning sound. Without thinking, Jiwon reached down and placed her hand on Davreth's head. The creature immediately relaxed, that purring vibration starting up again. "I feel safe," Jiwon said quietly. "Davreth has never threatened me. It follows me because it wants to, not because I force it to. And honestly, I like having it around. It is like having a very large dog. A very large dog that could tear through reinforced steel?" Vexim muttered. "So can humans, if we have the right tools," Jiwon countered. "But we do not judge you based on what you could do. We judge you based on what you choose to do. Davreth chooses to stay by my side. That should mean something." Suji smiled at Jiwon's words. She leaned over and whispered, "Well said." The council took a vote. They decided to allow the bond to continue for now, but with conditions. Jiwon had to wear a monitoring device at all times. Davreth had to undergo daily health scans, and security officers had to maintain visual contact with them during all waking hours. It was not perfect, but it was something. Jiwon accepted the terms. That evening, Jiwon returned to her quarters with Davreth following behind as usual. The creature had to squeeze through the doorway again, and Jiwon realized they were going to need bigger accommodations if this continued. She spread out the thermal blanket on her sleeping platform. Davreth climbed up immediately and curled into its usual position. But this time, instead of working at her desk, Jiwon sat on the edge of the platform. She was exhausted from the day's interrogations and presentations. Davreth made a soft sound and shifted its body, creating a space next to it. An invitation. Jiwon hesitated for only a moment before lying down next to the massive creature. Davreth's body heat was incredible, like having a living furnace beside her. The creature's scales were smooth and warm under her hand. That purring vibration filled the small room, a deep rumbling that Jiwon felt in her bones. For the first time since coming to the station, Jiwon felt completely at peace. She closed her eyes and let the exhaustion take her. Somewhere in the distance, she heard her door chime. Probably Hyun checking on her again. He could wait until morning. Davreth's breathing slowed as it fell asleep. One massive leg stretched out slightly, coming to rest against Jiwon's back. Protective, gentle, safe. Outside her quarters, security cameras recorded everything. The footage would be analyzed by dozens of specialists. They would measure the distance between human and creature. They would note the relaxed body language, the synchronized breathing patterns, and the absence of any threat displays. But none of their scientific analysis could capture the simple truth that anyone watching could see. This was not a predator and its prey. This was not a human and a dangerous alien. This was a bond, simple, pure, and real. 3 weeks passed, and life on the station developed a new rhythm. Jiwon went about her duties with Davreth constantly at her side. The creature followed her to the laboratories, to the dining hall, to her daily meetings with the research team. Station residents slowly grew accustomed to seeing them together, though most still kept their distance from the massive predator. But not everyone was adapting well to the situation. In the council chambers, tensions were rising. Councillor Telmon called for yet another session, and this time the tone was different. Jiwon could feel it the moment she entered. The air felt heavy with unspoken concerns. "We have monitored this situation for nearly a month," Telmon began, its translator converting the clicking sounds of its language into flat, emotionless words. "The data is concerning. The Kranash specimen has become entirely dependent on xenobiologist Jiwon. It refuses to eat unless she is present. It shows signs of distress when separated from her for more than 20 minutes. This is not healthy behavior for either party. Ji-won wanted to argue, but Ambassador Minho placed a hand on her shoulder and shook his head slightly. "Let them speak first," his expression said. Counselor Vexim stood up, its crystalline body flickering with agitated colors. More concerning is what this represents. This human has effectively weaponized an apex predator. Whether intentional or not, she now commands the loyalty of one of the most dangerous creatures in known space. "That is not what this is," Ji-won said, unable to stay quiet any longer. "Davreth is not a weapon. It is a living being that deserves respect and kindness." "Noble words," another council member said. "But the reality remains unchanged. You have created a security risk. What happens if you are injured? What happens if you die?" The creature's reaction could endanger the entire station. Director Yunho, the head of the Human Diplomatic Corps, stood up. He was a tall man with gray streaks in his hair and a commanding presence. "Members of the Council, we have provided extensive documentation showing that Davreth's health and temperament have improved dramatically since forming this bond. Surely that counts for something." "It counts for much," Telmon replied, "which is why this decision is difficult. However, we must prioritize the safety of the thousands of beings aboard this station. We cannot allow personal attachments to override security protocols." The words hit Ji-won like a physical blow. She knew what was coming next. "Therefore," Telmon continued, "the Council has voted. Xenobiologist Ji-won will be reassigned to the human embassy ship. Effective immediately. The Kranash specimen will be returned to its homeworld with a full medical report and recommendations for continued care." Beside Ji-won, Davreth made a low sound, not aggressive, but questioning. The creature could sense her distress. Ambassador Minho stood up quickly. "With respect, this decision is premature. We have not exhausted all options. Perhaps we could arrange for larger quarters or establish specific zones where Davreth would be permitted." "The decision is made," Vexim said firmly. "We have indulged this experiment long enough. It ends now." Ji-won felt her chest tighten. She looked down at Davreth, who was watching her with those 6 golden eyes. How could she explain to the creature that they were being separated? How could she make it understand that she had no choice? The council chamber doors suddenly burst open. Security alarms began blaring throughout the station. An automated voice announced, "Security breach in Section 12. All personnel evacuate immediately." The council members erupted into chaos, some fleeing toward the exits while others demanded information. Ji-won stood frozen as security officers rushed past her. Through the confusion, she heard one of them shouting into a communicator. "Extremist faction. They are armed. They are demanding an end to human membership in the council." Ji-won's blood ran cold. She had heard about the extremist groups who opposed humanity's inclusion in the galactic community. They believed humans were too dangerous, too unpredictable, too violent, but she never thought they would actually attack the station. Ambassador Minho grabbed her arm. "We need to get you to safety, now!" They ran toward the emergency exits, but the corridors were packed with panicking people. Species of every size and shape pushed against each other, desperate to escape the danger. Ji-won lost sight of Minho in the crowd. She felt herself being pushed backward, away from the exits. Davreth pressed close against her side, using its massive body to create a protective space around her. The creature's scales scraped against the walls as it forced its way through the crowd, keeping Ji-won safe in the shelter of its body. They emerged into a larger corridor, and Ji-won could finally breathe. She looked around, trying to get her bearings. The emergency signs pointed toward a shelter 3 sections away. She started running in that direction, and Davreth stayed right beside her. That was when she saw them. 3 figures in dark suits, faces covered by masks, holding weapons she did not recognize. They stood blocking the corridor ahead, and when they saw Ji-won, they raised their weapons. "Human," one of them said, the translator making the word sound like a curse. "You do not belong here. None of your kind do." Ji-won backed up slowly, but there was nowhere to go. The corridor behind her was still packed with evacuating personnel. She was trapped. Davreth stepped in front of her. The creature's body language changed instantly. Its scales seemed to darken, and all 6 eyes locked onto the attackers with predatory focus. A sound emerged from deep in its chest, a growl that made the walls vibrate. The attackers hesitated. They had weapons designed to take down most species, but they clearly had not expected to face a Krenash apex predator. "Move the creature aside," the leader ordered. "We only want the human." Davreth did not move. Instead, it spread its body wider, creating an impenetrable wall between Ji-won and the attackers. The creature's tail swept back and forth, a clear warning sign. Ji-won placed her hand on Davreth's back. "Do not hurt them," she whispered. She knew the creature could not understand her words, but maybe it could understand her intent. The standoff lasted for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. The attackers exchanged glances, unsure of what to do. They had expected fear and submission, not a loyal predator willing to defend its bonded human. Station security finally arrived, weapons drawn. They surrounded the attackers from behind, ordering them to drop their weapons. The extremists realized they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. They surrendered without a fight. As security officers led the attackers away, Ji-won slumped against the wall. Her legs felt weak, and her hands were shaking. Davreth turned around and lowered its head until it was level with her face. The creature made that soft, purring sound, trying to comfort her. "I am okay," Ji-won said, wrapping her arms around Davreth's massive neck. Thank you for protecting me." The council reconvened an hour later in a secure location. Everyone who had witnessed the attack was present, including Ji-won and Davreth. The atmosphere had completely changed. Where before there had been fear and suspicion, now there was thoughtful silence. Councillor Telmon spoke first. "We witnessed something today that requires us to reconsider our previous decision. The Krenash did not attack. It defended. It showed restraint and judgment. It protected xenobiologist Ji-won without causing harm to others." Vexim's crystalline body had stopped flashing angry colors. Now it pulsed with a softer blue. The creature had multiple opportunities to act with violence. It chose protection instead. That speaks to the nature of this bond. Director Yunho stood up. "Members of the council, what you witnessed today is exactly what humanity has been trying to show you. This is not about weaponizing creatures or creating dangerous alliances. This is about forming connections based on trust and mutual respect. Davreth protected Ji-won because she showed it kindness when no one else would." The council members looked at each other. Silent conversations happening through gestures and body language Ji-won could not interpret. Finally, Telmon spoke again. "We will postpone the separation order. The bond between xenobiologist Ji-won and the Krenash specimen has proven to be more complex than we initially understood. We need more time to study and assess the situation." It was not a complete victory, but it was something. Ji-won felt relief wash over her. She looked down at Davreth, and the creature looked back at her with those 6 golden eyes. In that moment, Ji-won understood something important. This bond was not just about her showing kindness to a creature. It was about 2 beings from completely different worlds finding trust and companionship in each other. And that was something worth fighting for. The attack changed everything. Within days, the council authorized a full research initiative to understand the bond between Ji-won and Davreth. Scientists from across the galaxy arrived at the station, each wanting to study this unprecedented phenomenon. Among them was someone Ji-won never expected to meet. Hana arrived on a transport from the Krenash homeworld. She was not Krenash herself, but something else entirely, a species called the Velm who lived on the same planet. The Velm were small, furry beings who served as cultural liaisons for the Krenash, one of the few species the predators tolerated in their territory. Jiwan met Hana in one of the station's conference rooms. Davreth was with her as always, and when Hana entered, the creature made a sound Jiwan had never heard before, something between a chirp and a rumble. Hana stopped in the doorway and bowed deeply. She spoke in her own language, and the translator converted her words. "Honored Guardian, it has been many generations since our peoples have met this way." Davreth approached Hana slowly and touched its nose to the top of her head, a gesture of recognition, maybe even respect. "You know each other?" Jiwan asked, confused. Hana smiled, showing small pointed teeth. "Not personally, but my people and the Krenash share a very old history. May I sit? I have much to tell you." They sat around a table that felt too large for just 3 beings, though Davreth took up considerable space even when lying down. Hana pulled out a data device and displayed holographic images of ancient cave paintings. "These are from the oldest Krenash historical sites," Hana explained. "For a long time, we thought they were just legends. Stories the old ones told. But looking at you and Davreth, I think maybe they were memories." The painting showed Krenash creatures alongside smaller beings, not hunting them, walking beside them, protecting them. "Our legends speak of a time before the Great Isolation," Hana continued, "when Krenash were not solitary hunters but guardians. They formed bonds with other species, protecting them from the dangerous wildlife of our world in exchange for companionship and care. The Velm were one of those species." Jiwan leaned forward, fascinated. "What happened? Why did they become solitary?" "Climate change, resource scarcity, war between different Krenash clans." Hana's expression grew sad. "The bonding behavior became a weakness. A Krenash that cared about others could be manipulated, threatened, hurt through those it protected. So over thousands of years, natural selection favored the solitary, the aggressive, the independent. The capacity for bonding became dormant, buried deep in their genetics." "Until now," Jiwan said softly, understanding dawning. "Until you," Hana confirmed. "You treated Davreth the way our ancestors once did, with kindness, care, and trust. You triggered something ancient, something that has been sleeping in Krenash DNA for millennia." Another specialist arrived later that day. Minjae was a human ethologist who had spent her career studying how animals became domesticated. She was older than Jiwan, with gray hair tied back in a practical bun and hands stained with ink from constantly taking notes. Minjae watched Davreth for hours, documenting every behavior and interaction. Finally, she called for a meeting with the Council's research committee. "What we are seeing," Minjae explained, displaying charts and data on a large screen, "is the early stage of a domestication process, but not the kind most species think of when they hear that word." Counselor Vexim's body flashed skeptical yellow. "Domestication requires generations of selective breeding. This happened in mere weeks." "Because domestication is not just about genetics," Minjae countered. "It is about behavior and trust. Let me tell you about Earth wolves. Thousands of years ago, humans and wolves were both apex predators competing for the same resources. We should have been enemies, but instead something remarkable happened." She pulled up images of ancient humans and wolves. Some wolves began following human hunting parties, eating the scraps we left behind, and instead of driving them away, humans allowed it. Eventually, some humans started deliberately feeding these wolves, sharing shelter with them during cold nights, protecting their pups, and slowly, generation by generation, wolves became dogs. But it started with a single act of kindness, someone offering food to a hungry wolf, someone letting a cold wolf sleep by their fire. Jiwan felt her breath catch. That was exactly what she had done with Davreth. The key, Minjae continued, is that domestication is a two-way street. It is not about humans dominating animals. It is about mutual benefit and emotional connection. Dogs protect us. We feed them. They give us companionship. We give them shelter. The relationship only works because both sides choose it. A new voice spoke up. It was Professor Taejin, a human anthropologist who had been studying interspecies relations. What Minjae is describing is something unique to humans. We do not just categorize other beings as threats or resources. We see them as potential friends. Taejin stood up and addressed the council directly. Humans form emotional bonds with almost anything. We name our vehicles, we talk to our plants, we create relationships with robots and artificial intelligences. We see a pattern that looks like a face, and we instinctively try to connect with it. This is not a weakness. It is our greatest strength. He pulled up data showing human behavior across thousands of years. Every animal species that humans have domesticated, we did so because we first saw them as individuals worth caring about. Horses, cattle, cats, dogs, birds, even insects like bees. We form partnerships with them. We protect them, and they help us in return. The council members listened in silence. Some looked skeptical. Others appeared thoughtful. Bora, the exobiologist, stood up to add her own findings. I have been monitoring the biological markers in both Jiwan and Davreth. They both show elevated levels of oxytocin, a bonding hormone. When they are together, their stress hormones decrease, their heart rates synchronize. These are the same biological responses we see in humans and their pets on Earth. So you are saying, Counselor Telmon said slowly, that this bond is not just behavioral, it is biological, chemical. Exactly, Bora confirmed. This is not Jiwan controlling Davreth through fear or manipulation. This is a genuine emotional connection that benefits both of them. The evidence was overwhelming. Over the next week, the research team presented their findings to the full council. They showed videos of Jiwan and Davreth's daily routines. The way the creature waited patiently while Jiwan worked. How it brought her food when it noticed she had not eaten. The gentle way it positioned its body to ensure she was always comfortable and safe. They also showed recordings from Krenash homeworld sent by Hana's people. Other Krenash were being shown the footage of Davreth and Jiwan. Their reactions were remarkable. Many showed signs of agitation, but not aggression. Something closer to longing. Recognition. We think, Hana explained during one presentation, that seeing Davreth in a bonded state is triggering memories in other Krenash. Genetic memories, perhaps, of what their species once was. We have received hundreds of requests from Krenash who want to attempt similar bonds. The revelation shocked the council. If multiple Krenash could form bonds with other species, it would completely change the galactic understanding of their nature. During a break in the presentations, Jiwan sat with Davreth in a quiet observation lounge. Through the window, she could see stars stretching into infinity. Hyun had called earlier, excited about all the attention his sister was getting. Their parents had sent messages from Earth, worried but proud. Do you understand what is happening? Jiwan asked Davreth quietly. Everyone is trying to figure out why you stay with me, why you protect me, why you care. Davreth made that soft purring sound and rested its massive head on her lap. The weight was comforting, familiar. I wish I could explain to them that it is simple, Jiwan continued, stroking the creature's scales. You were cold and hurt. I helped you. You were lonely. I gave you companionship. That is all it took. Just basic kindness. Through the window, she saw a transport ship arriving. More researchers, probably. More people wanting to study them, measure them, and understand them. Jiwan was tired of being analyzed, but she understood why it mattered. If one bond could exist, then countless others could too. The galaxy could change. Species that had been isolated and feared could find connection. Professor Tajin found them in the lounge an hour later. He sat down across from Jiwon and smiled. The council is deliberating, but I think they are beginning to understand. Understand what? Jiwon asked. That humanity's gift to the galaxy is not technology or resources. It is perspective. Tajin gestured toward Davreth. We look at a creature like this, and we do not see a monster. We see a being capable of loyalty, trust, and love. We see potential for friendship. That ability to look past fear and see connection, that is something special. Jiwon felt tears prick her eyes. I just wanted to help. I know, Tajin said gently. And that is exactly why it worked. The council's final deliberations took 3 days. During that time, Jiwon and Davreth continued their normal routine, though nothing felt normal anymore. Everyone on the station watched them now, not with fear but with curiosity, wonder, hope.